Hi everybody, welcome to today's Shed Life. I'm so excited today to have two disruptors with me. So what we're talking about today is disruptive business, and I had the absolute privilege a couple of months ago of judging the UK Business Awards, and I was completely delighted that I got the disruptive business category because we're trying to be a bit disruptive in our own sector. So I thought there'd be bags that we could learn from the entrance to that category. Well, the winners of that category were the RHP Group, who are a housing association, and I met one of the guests that I have with me today, Emily, on that awards, and she's brought a friend. She's brought Chloe along with her as well to talk about how they won that award and what disruptive business actually means to them. So really interestingly, it wasn't a commercial or a tech or any of an obvious innovative business that won the award. It was a housing association, and I believe you guys operate across London. You've got about 10,000 homes, so something that's often seen, potentially not anymore, but often seen as a relatively traditional sector, and obviously a very established sector. So it was absolutely brilliant to see this entry come through into the UK Business Awards and smash it out of the park. You did a great job. So I was so excited to talk to you. So I have with me Emily Ward, who is the Business Insight and Risk Manager at RHP. Now, she previously led the customer service team and the e-commerce, I guess, the e-marketing for the group. So she's got a lot of understanding of the client side of it. And she's brought along Chloë Marsh, who is head of engagement, looking after all the internal engagement, but external engagement, I guess, as well. So between the two of you, we've got the full mix of the disruptive innovation that you put into the group, which then absolutely smashed the awards. So do you want to just briefly introduce yourselves and just give me an insight of what it meant to win the award and how it felt afterwards? Emily.
Oh, thank you. Sure. So at RHP, I guess I'm sort of the data head. My team look at how we're tracking performance, and also we manage risk as well, so we understand it from both sides. And I've been at RHP for about 6 years, and I'm just as in love with working at RHP as I have been, really. So when it comes to awards and things, I do like to sort of talk about the strategy, and I'm really familiar with it. It was an unusual awards though, because it was all virtual, wasn't it? And
it was crazy. I know, we did the entire day on Zoom, didn't we? It was
yeah. It was, but actually they did a great job at creating the atmosphere. And you as judges made us settle our nerves very quickly, which was, I think, made quite a lot of difference to us when we came in, because it allowed us to focus. And I was also pitching with some great support from our comms team and from Jay, who heads up our sort of smart home and smart tech stuff. So we had a great day, and we absolutely loved hearing your feedback as well, because it was just great to get that constructive feedback and the positive feedback too.
And Chloe, what has the impact been on the housing association since this happened? Was everybody shocked, amazed, excited?
Oh yes, all of those things. It was brilliant, because especially during lockdown, it's really important to have those little moments that create that buzz and that sense of togetherness. Yeah. And I think what was really powerful about that award is everybody could see they'd played a part in it. So no matter what role you had in the business, everyone had contributed to that disruptive strategy. And we were all really proud of the results. So it was so amazing to hear that other people recognised the significance of it as well. So yeah, really brilliant buzz, everybody really proud, and it's, you know, that good feelings continued actually, so that's really important to us.
And what we loved as judges looking at this is you hadn't sent the chief exec, you know, and a bunch of people sitting in suits. I'm sure your chief exec doesn't wear a suit, actually. I'm sure he's not like that. But you'd actually sent the guys on the ground, and compared to the other teams we saw, what we saw was the same level of positive enthusiasm that you guys are already using already. So you know, it was a properly integrated thought process, because the disruption had been led, you know, through the whole business, and you brought representative people along to explain that. So that was great. Do you briefly, for those people who aren't aware, could you describe for us, possibly Emily, if you could take this one, what was it that was disruptive about what you did over that kind of couple of year period with the association?
I think what we were trying to do was change the way that the sector looked at the trade-off between customer service and service delivery and operating cost. We were trying to sort of reimagine housing, really, as that it's possible to deliver a brilliant customer service, making use of the digital evolution that was happening, but also to lower the costs of delivering that. Because as a charity and as a sector, we need to find more money to build more homes for people, because as a nation, we've got a housing crisis. So I guess what really our disruption was to try and prove it was possible to move social housing tenants who can to an excellent digital platform that they're thrilled with, but at the same time to lower our operating costs. And we've had lots of lessons along the way, but ultimately we've gone some way to proving that goal.
And just in terms of the digital platform, I mean, this included things like moving from face-to-face or telephone services to actually putting digital technology into each of the houses, and people using apps to ask for maintenance, to get feedback, to ask questions. So the whole thing became so there was quite a big education process, I guess, to do with your client base as well, which
Absolutely, yeah. And I think one of the things that I was thinking before this conversation was how critical all of our employees were in achieving that, because when customers were calling us, they were spending time on the phone exploring how digitally enabled they were and demonstrating to them how they can use it. We also did that through setting up digital champions clubs, and around 500 of our customers actually attended those. So they were, and in fact, even our caretakers who are responsible for maintenance in our properties had smartphones, and they were demonstrating them as well. So they were all really key to this change happening, and it did take time, but it did happen.
Yeah. So Chloë, obviously, you know the importance of purpose, particularly the sector that you're in, but also the role that you're doing. How did this innovation link through to the purpose of the organisation, and how much did that extra motivation come from the fact it was connected, the innovation, the disruption was connected to the purpose?
Oh, it was incredibly important, and it was actually our starting point when we went out and communicated our plans to employees to really gain their hearts and minds. So as Emily explained, the disruptive business model was all around improving the customer experience whilst reducing costs, but the end goal for reducing those costs was so we could build more much needed homes for people who needed them, and to play our part in helping to solve the housing crisis. So really the importance for us was creating that link with employees, that this shift towards digital services was not only to improve that customer experience, but it was actually the end goal was going to help us build more homes as well. And throughout everything we did, we went back to that why, we went back to that purpose, just to keep reinforcing that with employees as well.
Yeah, that connection was incredibly strong when we looked at the entry. In terms of COVID, most of this was already well up and running, or at least the programme was up and running pre-COVID. Did it strengthen the association going into COVID? Did it make things easier? Were there things you've had to adapt and do to accelerate the change even more as a result of the lockdown?
I think COVID has helped it really come into its own.
Yeah.
We were really lucky actually that we had those strong digital services in place. So when our office had to shut at the start of lockdown, it meant there was very minimal disruption to our service, because most of it was already being done online. And those customers that were still coming into the office for that face-to-face contact actually were nudged more online, whereas they might have not done that previously. We were, of course, very conscious about the group of customers who may not have digital access or might be in a vulnerable group. So we made sure we kept communicating important messages to them in other ways, like through the post or over the phone. We actually phoned all of our customers who were over 70 to check in with them, make sure they were okay, see if there's anything we could do. But on the whole, it really stood us in good stead. Internally as well, because we'd done a lot of work in the previous 18 months to move towards a more flexible way of working. We introduced a flexible working program called Your Work, Your Way, and that had real success in shifting people's perceptions around flexibility. It also meant we'd put tools and technology in place to help people work in that more agile way. So again, when lockdown came, there was a smooth transition to home working, which in turn meant there was minimal disruption to our customer service as well.
Yeah, and I loved the fact that you had innovative the internal offer as well as the external offer. So yeah, that internal innovation, that really stood out for me when looking at your entry, was the fact that you had absolutely integrated every part of your business model to say, how do we converge around this digitalization and make it work on both sides of it? Emily, you touched on this already. In terms of the customer experience, how much of a journey was it? I don't know if you can remember some of the stats about where your customers were at the beginning and where they got to at the end, and what that's actually delivered in terms of either the cost savings and or the, then the housing stock that you can now create as a result of it.
So I think the most striking thing about our digital shift really from our customers has been our payments journey, which was entirely phone based, and it's now moved to, I'd say, between 91 and 99%, depending on the month, of payments made either online or through direct debit, a kind of a channel that's not the phone. And that had an immediate impact on our call centre because it was a significant proportion of the calls they received at the time. And that enabled our call centre to spend a lot longer on the phone to fix the more complicated problems, but also to spend time with customers who might want some demonstrating to get comfortable with using the website. We also had a big uptake on our help and advice because we started introducing some dynamic tools there, but we actually, I'd say we've been superseded now by some very good technology in other sectors around help and advice. So we're pretty much ready to meet that challenge and come up with some good stuff. But that has been answering very simple questions that our customers would have called us about before as well. We also introduced gas servicing booking, and that actually hasn't been in place over COVID because we've had to take a very different approach for that, but that was a really good journey, allowing our customers to choose 2-hour appointment slots, which within the sort of delivery and logistics world is a high standard of service, and we're really proud of that. So yeah, that's been taken up by a lot of customers choosing their gas service.
And have you, I'm sure you have, but been receiving feedback from the customers, and
yes.
What's the general kind of consensus coming back?
I mean, we get a lot of very positive comments saying we love your digital service. So we know that there's a group of customers who this suits them down to the ground because they can do the things they need to do in their own time without having to wait for the opening hours of a contact centre. But in fairness, we've also had a group of customers who say that it in places isn't as easy to use as it should be, which has helped us to design some improvements which are in the pipeline now. And we've had a group of customers say, well, actually, I just really rather do my business over the phone. And so that group, and there's a sort of a slight, but there's some similarities with that group, but it does span all ages, but it's perhaps particularly those between 40 and 60 we found. In some cases, some of those customers are just not really ready to use digital services yet. We've then shifted our approach actually, because we were very much digital by default for a while, and actually we've realized that let's let our customers vote with their feet, I suppose, and really tell us how good our digital services are by giving them the choice.
And in terms of your ultimate objective to be able to reinvest money in more housing stock, have you got a sense for how many more houses you may be able to commit to? I mean, I guess the COVID world has changed things a bit as well.
COVID world has turned that on its head. So in our 5-year strategy, we hope to deliver 1,000 homes, I think, Chloe, that's right, isn't it?
That's right,
and we're not backing down from that goal, but it's obviously really challenging. But I think we're just committed to building high quality homes. And those are for people who aren't served by the housing market at the moment. So shared ownership and affordable rent.
Right.
That's a particularly challenging build to do as well, to make a viable scheme. But that's what we have our team working really hard on.
So Chloë, you touched on this earlier. You obviously hooked the employee journey very much into that purpose that Emily's just articulated there. What else did you have to do to kind of bring your teams on the journey? Give us some of the ideas of the things that you did to bring that to life for people.
Yeah, so as well as starting with that why, as I mentioned earlier, we also made sure that we got employees involved as early as possible in the change. And that meant we actually didn't have all the answers yet when we went out to speak to them to say, this is our plan to create this fully digital service. But we were really open about that at the time. We told them the things we did know about and were certain about. However, we were open where there were things we didn't know about yet, and we wanted to get their feedback and their input, and they helped shape the service as well, which meant we really got their buy-in from the start. We also looked for points in that change process where we could give them a sense of certainty and security. So a really powerful thing.
Jobs were changing as a result of this, weren't they? So
absolutely. Yeah, so actually, because this all occurred as a result of a big government announcement in terms of all housing associations had to make a 4% rent cut over 4 years, wow. Employees were very conscious about that. And actually, throughout the sector, a lot of other housing associations were choosing to make people redundant as their first port of call to reduce costs. And the really powerful thing we did at the start, and that our exec team did, was make the commitment that we would not make anybody redundant during this period. However, it was a little bit of a two-way deal. And they said that in return, we would need people to be adaptable and flexible, because this new approach of ours would mean people would need to do things differently. But because they'd committed that up front, they'd given that sense of safety and security, they'd built that trust, people really came with us on that journey. And it was a challenging journey, but we wouldn't have been able to do it without employees. We also made sure we communicated through a number of different channels. So whether that be face-to-face, mixed with some digital, and just kept repeating those key messages over and over again. I look after the comms team as part of my role, so I'm very passionate about this, but I'm always saying to line managers, you cannot repeat things enough. And actually I always say, you need to repeat something 7 times at least before people take it in, particularly through times of change. So we made sure we had lots of different creative ways that we could bring the messages to life and repeat them. We also supported the change programme with targeted L&D as well, so people felt that they were given support to get any new skills they needed, as well as things to help people manage themselves through that change. Also made sure our line managers had all the tools and support they needed as well to in turn give their teams the support they needed. And we also made sure we celebrated success and quick wins along the way as well, because it did seem like a really ambitious thing we were trying to do when we were set the challenge. So to keep that motivation and to keep people realizing actually we are getting there, we made sure we dramatized those key milestones. We gave lots of kind of recognition, reward. We are great at celebrating at RHP, so that was a good thing to do along the way to keep people going.
I had a feeling you guys would be good at celebrating, actually. Just something told me, I don't know, it was a little instinct there. So yeah, huge change. That catalyst of the 4% rent cut, I guess, was the catalyst. For people in quasi, what might be perceived as more traditional sectors that are less disruptive, what would you say to them if they don't have that catalyst, but they want to drive disruption, innovation, or indeed, how do they find a catalyst? What would be your advice to other people who want to go through a period of innovation, creativity, and disruption? Emily, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think that one of the key things is to innovate with a real purpose. So reconnecting. If you were a charity, to just have that moment where you really say, what are we really here for? What are we good at? And what part of the world do we really want to change? Because when you've got a compelling question that really inspires you and a vision that as a group of people, you could really do anything you want, it starts to sort of generate ideas. That was actually very much how we approached this, which was we didn't really have a clear sense of how, but we just knew that what we wanted to do was handle this without employees or customers really losing anything, and if anything, gaining something. So I think connecting with that purpose and realizing that that's really the key driver for everything. And then of course,
what's that catalyst? Do you think you would have been as ambitious without that catalyst of the 4% change?
I mean, there was RHP right from the word go has been driven to be the best service provider in the UK. So our CEO, David, from 2000, when RHP became RHP, has had that kind of goal. And so there's always been a really fierce ambition in the organisation to just do the best for our customers. and also to be an inspiring employer. So that it was actually kind of speaking to the values that were already there and that had already drawn people together to the organisation. But I think that made us ready to handle and rise to a challenge, for sure. And that's one of the things I think that's really powerful in leadership, is that vision. I'd also say that I've been paying quite a lot of attention to understanding what about how an organisation works internally really helps it to excel and at what it wants to achieve as an outcome. So I think that that's often a really good area to explore for a business seeking to disrupt slightly, which is there are old ways and existing ways of doing things, but what's going on out there, perhaps with a different outcome in mind, but that could help us to do things more efficiently as well.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. One of my big learning so far from COVID, because we're not done yet, are we, is what people had to do under pressure. We were largely office based, like many law firms. We would have moved to much more flexible and agile working. It was always part of our plan to do that. But it was one of those things that was in our roadmap to do within the next year to 2 years. So we had to suddenly, I mean, we didn't even have laptops for the vast majority of our people. And we had to suddenly get everybody working from home within a couple of weeks. Our IT team were outstanding. And we had a benefit in hindsight in that we had a bit of a scare early on, because we had to go lock down a couple of our offices because we had a suspected case before COVID actually, the main lockdown started. So we kind of saw what was coming, and we managed to order probably what was left of the remaining laptops in the UK at that point. So, but when I reflect back on that, what we did in 2 weeks, we were planning to take 2 years to do it. And I think that catalyst for us, I think it's a huge lesson that I've taken now, which is to ask the question, if we only had 2 weeks to do this, how would we do it? And you know, it's really interesting, isn't it? That kind of thing that burning platform can force innovation. What's your take on it, Chloe, in terms of the advice you would give, I guess what you've learned as well from the last couple of years?
Yeah, so I guess it comes back to some of the things I was talking about that we did as we went through. So as we've all spoken about, just making sure you've really clearly defined that why and the reasons you're doing things, because you're going to have to keep coming back to that when you're making decisions to help shape your way forward, and checking back to that. Also, get your employees as involved as possible. Help to create two-way conversations so people don't feel done to, and they feel involved in whatever that change is as well. And be really open and honest along the way. If things aren't working and you need to try something different, it's fine to experiment, and nothing always goes 100% as you plan it, and you have to be agile and change your approach. But I think it's much better to be really open with people about that, and say, hey, we've learnt from it, let's try something different and move on. I'd also say that be patient, because longer term change can take a while to achieve. For us, it did take, probably was the foundations were being built, as Emily said, a couple of years prior to that, really. And that rent reduction was really that catalyst to turbocharge it.
Yeah.
And maybe break that journey down into smaller manageable chunks, especially if you're communicating to employees, so it doesn't feel overwhelming for people as well. And finally, I'd just say go for it. Be brave and see what you can do. And if things don't work out, learn from it, try something different, and keep going.
I knew I was going to love this talk. I feel like I'm just getting a masterclass here. This is fantastic. Masterclass in disruption. I wish I was making notes. I'll have to watch it back. Brilliant advice there. I mean, you are obviously getting the RHP name out there as the disruptor and the leader in your sector for what you're doing. And you've obviously shown great leadership internally. You talked about your CEO as well, and I know that he's been very visionary in how that's driving. Not necessarily thinking about him, but you're very welcome to do so. What would be the 3 words that you would use to describe a great leader, either in terms of leadership, in the business being a leader in its sector, or as an individual? Emily, can you find 3 words to just kind of crunch this down for us?
I'm going to use visionary again. I think that's key, but also consistency. Yeah, I think that knowing that leader stands for something, or the things that they stand for, is key. And then the final one is fallible. I think you need to know that you're adding something because if you've got someone who's perfect, what can you really bring to the table?
I love that. I'm getting so much personal advice here as well. So this is brilliant. Come on, Chloe, give me some more.
So I hope my first one's allowed. I'm going to cheat slightly, but it's emotional intelligence.
2 words, but I'll let you have
2 words. I could go with empathy, slightly linked, but yeah, I just think that's so important for leaders, just to have that emotional intelligence, empathy, kindness.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we forget these softer skills, and I definitely know the leaders that I've looked up to and been inspired by, that's a big attribute.
And don't you think, it sounds critical, I'm not being critical, but wouldn't it be wonderful if we could stop calling them the softer skills? I actually think they're the harder skills.
Absolutely. And actually we call them power skills at RHP. So I shouldn't have got, I totally, absolutely 100% agree with you. The second one would be courageous. And just some of the things we've talked about in terms of, if you want to make a change, you have to be brave, and show your teams you're being brave, and organisation too. You're probably quite scared yourself inside. Just because you're a leader doesn't mean that you're not nervous about it. But you have to take a leap of faith, I think, and if you expect people to come with you on that journey as well. And then the final one for me would be resilient. As we've all touched on, things don't always go to plan. And that's okay, and it's just learning to go through those times and learn from them and grow from them.
Perfect. Brilliant answers. I knew you wouldn't let me down on that one. And the final thing that I just want to ask you, slightly random, I know, but what is your favorite quote? What is the motto that you guys live your lives by, that has really resonated with you and stayed there? So Emily, have you got one for us? Something spring to mind?
One to do with noise, which I tell myself a lot, which is that you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should use them in that proportion. And I am a talker, so I remind myself of that a lot.
Yeah, I definitely need that one as well. Chloe?
Mine is the magic happens outside of your comfort zone. So yeah, really linked to a lot of the things we've been talking about, and I've really learned that through working at RHP, that if you want to achieve extraordinary things, you have to leave your comfort zone to do that, and can be scary, but you get so much reward from the end of it and the end result as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. I've been absolutely delighted to talk to you guys. I knew you would have a huge amount of insight, and I know myself personally, but also my business and many other businesses can learn a huge amount from what you guys have been through. So thank you so much for sharing. What's next? You know, what's the next big innovation? I can't wait to see kind of where it goes. And you know, hopefully we might talk again in some point, just to kind of catch up with how it's all going. But thank you so much for sparing the time to talk to us. And yeah, congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It has been.
Definitely.